excuse me, I've got bullet point cards because this is a new talk that I just wrote this last week about change. Here we go, here's me. So I'm, as well as being co-founder of Wildfire Women, I'm also a Bolsoul life coach, and I've been offering coaching and healing and therapy to women for about the last 10 years. And so, yeah, my work really is all about change. Women come to me when they feel stuck and lost, and maybe they want to change their job or the relationship or something else, or maybe they don't know what they need to change, or it's something internal but they know they need to do something about it. And change can feel really scary. I was thinking it's much like my face is in this photo. You can see I'm smiling, but there's fear in my eyes. And the reason that there's fear in my eyes is because I'm just about to walk over the longest swing bridge in New Zealand. And for me, that was 110 metres of slight terror, because it's this wobbly bridge over a ravine which had a deep gorge underneath, and I thought the New Zealanders probably aren't going to kill off British tourists, but you can never be quite sure. And I was just chatting to Anne about change actually, and saying, yes, there's the change that happens to you and that you have to deal with, but the more that you step into knowing who you are and what your needs are, the more that you come across that need for self-motivated change, to step up and change things in your life that aren't right anymore, that aren't working, that aren't serving your highest good. And also, just being alive means that you will have dealt with a certain amount of change. I agree with John F. Kennedy's quote here: there is nothing more certain and unchanging than uncertainty and change. So basically it's something we all have to deal with, of course, but it's how you handle it, and I think often how quickly you're able to pay attention to it that really makes a difference. I've had quite a few crises and hit rock bottom a number of times in my life, and over the years I've learned that that's often been because I haven't been truly paying attention to myself. So with all this work with change, I came up with what I think are the 4 stages of change, and I'm going to go into these much more in depth in a moment. But it's a little bit like Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey, but the kind of dummies guide, the abbreviated form. And as I go through each of the stages, it'd be great if you just have a think about your own life, think about anything that you've already changed, that you might like to change, that you might be halfway through changing, and think about what stage you might be at. But the thing that I think often precedes change in 90% of the time and isn't really talked about is something that is really often happens, and it's because as humans we like to take the path of least resistance. Why change something if you don't need to? Why change something if something's kind of okay enough? But then you get to a point where you start getting really pissed off. It's the point where you say to yourself, maybe I've had enough now. Maybe it's time that I listen to that pissed offness in me, which is actually, I think, is a really good thing. It's your internal guidance system that being pissed off. It's telling you that you really have had enough. And I was trying to think of, I was thinking that is a really good question to ask yourself. Have I had enough now? Is it time for me to change? And I was trying to turn that into an acronym. And I was thinking, it's very narcissistic of me and vain, but it actually works really well with my own name. So as you can see, the question for yourself to know if you've had enough is it time? I've had enough already. And I thought that an easy and quick way of thinking about that would be the Taya monster. So here is what a Taya monster looks like. It's what I look like when I've had enough already. It's the way that you can think about me if you're thinking about whether you need to make a change, and you're starting to feel a little bit like that. That's me on a good day. So I think that often we can be alerted that there are signs and symptoms that show us that we need to make a change. And these can range from kind of mild, as in we're not enjoying our job, we're feeling a bit fed up or unfulfilled, to quite severe. And I think that if we ignore that wake up call, which is a bit like an inner alarm clock, you know, we keep putting it on snooze, and sometimes put it on snooze over a lot of years, to the point where that wake up call, that alarm clock, is kind of like buzzing in our face and won't stop. Unfortunately, for some people, this can be expressed in different ways, and I think sometimes the sign that somebody needs a change in their life is that they may be experiencing some of these things. Certainly, my need for change has come out sometimes as health issues, you know, having mental or emotional problems, relationships breaking down, and I know some of you here maybe have experienced some of these things in your life. The worst one for me, and probably some of you have heard my story before, my worst probably rock bottom happened for me when I was 26. I became very ill with what was later diagnosed as chronic fatigue syndrome, and that was very scary and very hard. It's not much talked about, this illness. There's actually a film that's just come out called Unrest, which is a documentary that explores what it feels like to get this illness. But what had preceded that for me is that I had essentially learned how to ignore myself. My family situation, I had parents that were warring. It was quite a stressful environment growing up. I was trying to keep everything together, and I just hadn't learned how to pay attention and listen to myself and know what would make me happy in my life. So I didn't know how to create positive change. And I think I had a bad relationship and work I didn't like, and all of this stress eventually came out and was expressed in my body in this form of kind of extreme burnout, which is very medical. I had many tests to show that it was very much a real thing and not purely psychological, as some people think of this illness. And it made me feel like I was trapped in my body. It made me feel really desperate. At times I didn't know if I wanted to be alive anymore, because I was so young, and I thought this might go on forever. But I thought I must use this situation to understand the mind-body connection and to learn about myself. And to cut a long story short, it took me 6 years and a lot of hard work, but I started to get to know me and what kind of changes I needed to make in my life, and understand my emotions and the need for creativity and fun and all sorts of things. And I eventually, luckily, got better, and I've been well for 8 years now, so it makes me feel very appreciative. But on a lighter note, one of my other rock bottoms was that before I got ill, I had a job in Edinburgh where I was working for an advertising agency selling magazine space, essentially. I absolutely hated it. I was terrible at it. I tried to get my bosses to help me, they wouldn't help me, so I ended up walking out of my desk at lunchtime, leaving my job and leaving a half-eaten donut on the desk. And I like to think of this as my Homer Simpson story, but of course Homer would never have left a half-eaten donut on the desk, would he? So let's go to point number 1 about change. Many people have had experiences like this. Denial. I think often after feeling really, really pissed off, and part of, or maybe before we get to the point of feeling pissed off, we live in a state of denial that we think we can't change, and we say things to ourselves like, I'm too old to change, how will I earn money, I don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to change our identity. We think people know us as this person who does this work, who talks about this stuff. You feel lost. You don't want to change because that might mean going through some pain. You know, for example, if you need to do something like go through a divorce, and you think to yourself, why can't I just settle? What's wrong with me? Why can everybody else do this job or settle in their relationship or whatever it is? Why can't I? And yeah, we feel resistant and scared, and we want to stay in this place. But do you know what the thing is that we actually most fear? No, it's not actually. I just put that up because I thought it was funny and creep you out because it's nearly Halloween. The thing that we actually most fear is I wish I could do like a big ominous voice, like the unknown.
It's quite good.
Thank you. Our ego, the part of us that wants to keep us safe and secure, thinks, better the devil that we know. We want to sit in our comfort zone. Our comfort zone feels like sitting on the sofa at home with your slippers on, eating chocolate and watching Netflix. And who would want to leave that? Except, of course, after a while, the sofa gets threadbare, the slippers get stinky, you run out of chocolates, or there's only those ones left in Quality Street that nobody likes, and you're watching constant reruns of Friends, especially the one where Ross says to Rachel, we're on a break, and they have a big argument over and over again. But we think about change as we don't want to open that door to change, because we think what's outside is the dark of night, and we're going to have to jump off a cliff with no parachute, and at the bottom there's just going to be a pile of angry hedgehogs. And we're scared. We want to hide. I never thought I'd say it's all because of the hedgehogs, but it really is. So we stay in that place until we get really, really, really pissed off and the tail monster comes out. And finally, we decide that we're going to move to step 2, which is the place of acceptance. And we might not have changed the outer situation yet. We maybe don't have a plan, but we've got to that point where we think, actually, I accept that I need to do something about this, and I need to change an outer situation in my life. Often to do this, though, I often see in my coaching work that there are inner patterns, inner emotional and mental patterns that come up for many of us, particularly as women, that have often meant that we've stayed in situations too long. And these are our survival patterns. And I think the irony of survival patterns is they don't actually necessarily help us to survive as adults. They were the thing that we felt we needed to be pleased or loved or be safe as children, but they've kind of got worn out and outdated now, but they're still in operation as adults. And I often work with people around looking at these and looking at whether they're really relevant to our lives anymore and how they might be holding us back. And I very quickly go through some of these patterns that I've seen. And I'm giving you the kind of most extreme version of the patterns. So if you check in with yourself to see if you relate to any of them, you might think, oh, maybe I relate a bit, or maybe you come up with your own that you know is still in operation in your life. So very quickly, the first one is the lonely girl, and she learned how to, she studied hard, she didn't feel very encouraged by her parents, she felt a little bit emotionally neglected, she felt her worth came through working hard at school and maybe as an adult getting more qualifications or upping her skills. And the way for her to heal is to ask for help and feel like she needs to get things less perfect. The serving girl, it's all about other people for her. So she grew up in a family environment where it was about helping parents who maybe felt overwhelmed. She abandons herself in favour of other people, and the way for her to heal is to set boundaries and learn what her own needs are. The achiever is as it sounds. She grew up in a family that really valued achievement over anything else. And that could have been whatever the family values were. So it could have been school grades or in a future career climbing the corporate ladder or earning lots of money, but it could also have been getting amazing at a musical instrument. And the hard thing for her in her adult life is that she may get burnt out keeping on striving for this achievement. Her inner life might feel a bit empty, or she might not be prioritising her relationships or what brings her true joy. And the way for her, of course, is also to discover what truly makes her happy and care less about how things outwardly appear. The space girl, she finds it hard to get stuff done. It's hard for her to create structure and be self-motivated. It could have come from a family where she was emotionally or physically abused, or just felt a little bit like things were always changing, there was lack of stability. So she can feel a little bit lost. And her way forward is to get support with what she wants to get done in her life, learn how to be more self-motivated, and learn to express her creative gifts. So the final one is the rebel girl, and she grew up with more authoritarian parents who she felt like she couldn't please. So the only way for her to get validation and love was to please her peers by rebelling. And in her adult life, it's sometimes hard for her to commit. The positive is that she may be an amazing revolutionary and create great change in the world. if she can get the support and find the structure to do that and not constantly rebel against things and push and self-sabotage. So, as you can hear with all of those types, the thing underneath is not feeling good enough, abandoning yourself in some kind of a way, and therefore not taking on maybe the change you need, the change that really values and listens to you quick enough. But the way through all of these is to embrace your inner Wonder Woman, to find that courage within and that strength as a woman to connect with what's true for you and what you truly need. But of course, as we're at Wildfire Women, I would say your inner wildfire woman is the part of you that can most support you to step up to the next part, of change, which is the quest. So once you've stepped out of denial, you got really pissed off, you stepped out of denial, you accept that you need to make a change, the next part is actually going and doing it. And it's the part in the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell calls, I think, the road of trials and tribulations, where you might meet a monster on the path. And obviously sometimes change can happen really quickly and easily. You know, that thing that sometimes life is surprising. But other times it takes some resilience and courage to figure out where you need to go and to find the people and the support or the answers. And I think it's important to say that, because I think that often in the personal development world, we get taught this thing which is just change one belief, just do this one thing, and then your whole life will change. But my experience has been that to create change, we actually need the courage and the resilience to keep on going and try again if something doesn't work out immediately. And this is a story for one of my clients. I'm calling her Kate. That's not her and that's not her name, but the story is true. And Kate came to me because she was a single mum and a paralegal in New York, and she felt very stuck in her job. She didn't feel like she was earning enough money to really support her daughter, and she didn't feel like she was stepping into the woman that she could be to be an example to her daughter as well. But she didn't feel confident or ready and didn't quite know how to move to the next place. But in asking what she'd really love to do, she said she'd like to become a writer, and her dream work-wise at this moment would be to become a paralegal at the fashion house Ralph Lauren. So after a bit of work together, we worked on her confidence and interview techniques and all sorts of things and the inner battles. She went for a few interviews, but finally, amazingly, managed to get an interview at Ralph Lauren. She got the job, and then what happened, which leads to my point 4, was that she started working there. And at the same time as developing her skills as a writer, she started blogging and writing poetry and going to a university class to express that side of her as well. So you think that was the end of the story. But there's a "or try again" in brackets here, because it sometimes takes a little bit of trial and error, like I say, and sometimes you get there and it's not quite where you want to be. So when she started working at Ralph Lauren, she discovered that it wasn't a very nice place to work. Sorry, Ralph Lauren. There was a lot of politics going on, the relationships weren't good, it wasn't run very well, and she actually started to have a horrible time. So we had to go back to the drawing board. She had to go back to stage 3, back on the quest again, to find where she really wanted to go. And she carried on going for interviews, and to cut a long story short, she ended up first getting offered a position back at her old company, but for twice the money and in a managerial position. And then she, because of that, which she did for a little while, she ended up at this really amazing law firm, which I think works with celebrity sports stars, earning so much more money than she was, feeling so much more satisfied. I think she's now started her own company since then with her partner, and she made it to point 4. Obviously, all of these stages repeat, and we're all at different points at any one time with different areas of our lives. So, in conclusion, I'd like you to think about change that you've made in your life, and think about what you learnt from that change, even if it was hard. Both the outer things that change that really supported you, but also the inner resources that you gained. And I think it's easy for us to often not acknowledge how much we've learnt from our life experiences. So whether it's that you've learnt to really hone and listen to your intuition, or you've learnt something important about life, or you've built up your strength and courage to know that you could do that again if you needed to. One of the big things, as I've said, for me is I learned how to listen to myself sooner. And it's what I do in my work all the time. I listen to other people, and I'm kind of like a truth detective. It feels so important to me to get out what's authentic for a person so that we can work out what they practically need to do. And I know sometimes acceptance is also the key. You know, they say accept the things you cannot change and change the things that you can. So, and there's timing around change as well. But I want to say, don't be afraid of change. Really listen to yourself. Don't let fear hold you back. Connect with your inner Wonder Woman, your inner wildfire woman, because change is hard at first, messy in the middle, but it can be really gorgeous at the end. Thank you.